Recording.
Okay, so good evening, everybody, and welcome to the February 7th ZBA meeting. We're going to begin with roll call. Henry Rua, Vice Chair. Henry, are you here?
If I mute myself, I'm here.
Yes, okay. Joe Mayone?
Here.
Tim Scott?
Here.
Randy Ricks?
Here.
And Bill Shermer, our alternate. Bill, are you here? He may be muted.
He's not.
Are you
he's
here?
Not, I can see him.
I saw
Can't hear
Willie.
you, Bill.
Bill,
See-
can you hear us?
I see Bill right now. He's talking, but okay, now he's muted.
He's muted. Okay, so we have a quorum and we shall proceed. The first order of business is the Honorland LLC resolution and decision. I would like to make the following motion. Whereas Honorland LLC, the owner of residential property SBL 1810-3 20.130 on River Road in the Waterfront Overlay District located in Malden on Hudson, requested a 25-foot variance from the required 50-foot setback from the high water mean mark. And whereas unbeknownst to the ZBA, the planning board had in 2004 approved the subdivision of this property, including the delineation of the setbacks applicable at the time of approval. Therefore, be it resolved that the Honorland property on River Road was approved by the planning board on January 1st, 2004, making it a pre-existing and non-conforming site plan. Be it further resolved that since the waterfront overlay was not adopted and made part of the Saugerties zoning law until 2006, the applicant's variance request is not necessary, and the applicant may pursue construction as long as it is within the setback boundaries set forth in the 2004 subdivision approved by the planning board. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Any discussion? I have one thing I want to discuss. Unfortunately, one of the things that sometimes happens when people make variance requests to the ZBA, they don't give us all the information we need. We could have resolved, didn't even have to come to the ZBA. We didn't get this information until 2 weeks, 3 weeks after we had our public hearing. It would have saved everybody a lot of time and energy if all of the information that the ZBA needs to make a decision is with us when we start the process. So Jesse, I'm glad that you're able to proceed, but just in case you ever have to come before the ZBA again, just double check that everything that you need is given to us.
I will, and I'm sorry for
Apologize, Patty.
I'm sorry?
We will be totally prepared.
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate because you went through a lot of angst for nothing. The public was participating and site visits were had. It was a lot of stuff that went into it. It was unnecessary. So,
That's on me.
okay, if there's no other discussion, I'll do a roll call vote. Henry?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Tim?
yes.
Randy?
Yes.
And I vote yes. And Kevin, you will get this to Lisa Stanley tomorrow and send it out written to the applicant so that he has a copy as well.
Will do.
Okay.
Members of the board, I appreciate your time.
Thank you all.
Okay.
you.
Okay, next order of business is Tarpon Towers 2 LLC, Verizon Wireless, public hearing. I think I'd like to just start. I need to start with just one order of business for the board. I would like to make a motion to send this application to the Ulster County Planning Board for review. Can I have a second?
Second.
Okay, there were many choices. Kevin, pick one. Is there any discussion? All right. I want to just note one thing. We are in the process of doing the part 2 and part 3 SECRA portion of the application, and we're preparing that, but with Dan Schuster not available at all because of no electricity and not able to be on, we'll get that at another time. We just don't have that tonight. It is, however, an unlisted action under SECRA. So let's do the vote, please, on the motion to send this application to the Ulster County Planning Board, which will go out to them tomorrow morning. Henry,
Yes.
Joe, Tim,
Yes.
Randy,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Okay, so now this is the Mount Marion Fire Department cell tower that we discussed last year as part of the Monroe Doctrine, the balancing of interests. We are now reviewing it as both a use variance and an area variance. We have two new board members who were not part of that application at all. So if things are said that most of you already know, please excuse it, but we want everybody to be up to speed. We also have some new neighbors in the area that were not even aware of this. So they may be on the call if they have electricity, and we want them to also feel free to ask questions about it. So just to recap, the applicant is proposing to install and operate a new communications facility, including a 120-foot monopole tower and 4-foot lightning rod antenna at the Mount Marion Firehouse. The applicant is requesting a use variance because the facility is not permitted in a residential hamlet under the town zoning law. The applicant is also requesting area variances of 12 feet for the front yard, which is the Kings Highway side, 40 foot for the side yard, which is Glasgow Turnpike, and 165 foot for the rear yard, and that is the property on the same side of the firehouse, but still on Glasgow Turnpike. And these are required from the required setbacks of 186 feet set forth in the zoning law. The appeal states that due to the configuration of the property, the tower is not able to meet the 186-foot setback required. The proposed tower location is 174 feet from the front property line, 159 from the side property line, and 19 feet from the rear property line. Mr. Olson, did you have anything you wanted to add to that kind of update of the application?
Yeah, I would. Thank you very much. I want to just start out by saying that I think we're going to respectfully disagree on the public hearing status. There were 4 public hearings on the substance of the application, starting back on July 6th and going through 2020. I think if you look at the June 2020 meeting minutes, when the ZBA first wanted to schedule a public hearing on this, you stated you wanted the public hearing to be on the government immunity first, and that's correct. We then had a discussion, which was captured in your meeting minutes, even though we don't have the transcripts, which are required by law to be done. But the meeting minutes very clearly show that I requested and was granted the right to have a public hearing also on the application. That is referenced in the public hearing notice itself. It's clearly a dual purpose. I just don't want the record to think that this is the first public hearing, because our position is it's absolutely not.
No, and nobody is saying it is. You are right. But
Okay.
because we were dealing with Monroe and because we were dealing with immunity from zoning, the use portion of it never was discussed. People focused on the variances, I will say that. And also we have, as I just mentioned, 2 new board members who don't know anything about this application other than what they've been able to read, who are going to be voting on this. And we have new members of the public that have moved into the neighborhood. So just in general terms, in terms of public accountability, having the public participate to ask questions is not a bad thing. And I understand what you're saying. And we did have public hearings, and it was noticed that they could talk about any of those other things. But people focused on the issue at hand, which was the immunity from zoning.
I'm not suggesting, and please don't take my comment that I just made as the public should not have an opportunity to comment. I never suggested that. I had to say what I said because at the last month's meeting, actually, it was stated by your counsel that no, the public hearing actually was just for the governmental immunity. So I just want the record to be clarified. That's all. And I would say that 90% of the comments were actually based on the application and substance, not the governmental immunity test. So having said that, as you stated, we are looking to build a 120-foot tower. at the Mount Marion Fire Department. It's in the residential hamlet zoning district, so we require a use variance. There are 3 other setback variances that are required. As you know, the ZBA encouraged us to go to the industrial zone, which we did, and then you denied the application in January. So now we're back at the fire department because that application was never fully considered. So I just wanted to point out a couple of things. Obviously, there's a lot of information still in the record, and I don't know if Ron Grafe is on the call today, but he has reviewed the application. I'll summarize a few of the things he has said about the Mount Marion application. One thing he said was that we have absolutely demonstrated there are significant gaps in coverage in the Mount Marion area. He also confirmed that the data we provided shows substantial capacity issues. He confirmed that the 120-foot height is the minimum height necessary. And he said that the project is, quote, ideally located, close quote. He then went on to say, yes, you should look at some alternatives in the industrial zoning district, which the ZBA echoed that concern. Our initial response was, we don't think it's a good idea. The tower is going to have to be taller. And we made that very, very clear. We pushed back because we knew we were going to need a taller tower. And please, the ZBA, hopefully you remember, because in October, at the October 2020 meeting, Chair Goldberg at the time said the ZBA would really appreciate some investigation of available sites on Industrial Drive, which is in the industrial zone. Yes, it would have to be a type 5 tower, which is what it is going to have to be at the firehouse now. But it also could be higher, and that's end quote. So we got pushed over there. We didn't want to do it because we thought that a higher tower over there was not a good idea. We thought the fire department was the best location. That's why we applied for that location.
Mr. Olson, just to clarify something, the industrial zone was not the problem. The light industrial zone was not the problem. It was where the tower was sited within the industrial zone that was the problem. So the fact that you were in the industrial zone was a great thing. We were initially very pleased with that. We were not pleased with where you sited it so close to residents. So that was the issue, and not the industrial zone itself.
No, it was actually Industrial Drive. The reference, the
Industrial
ZBA
Drive,
wanted
right,
us to go to Industrial Drive because it's in the OLI zoning district. There were only 2 properties that were potentially available. We picked the property that we thought was the best. Again, that's just contextual purposes, but we're here to talk about the fire department application.
Yes, we are.
And, but I didn't think we can do so without context. So again, your consultant, I don't think Ron is here, but he has confirmed that the Mount Marion Fire Department is ideally located for the problems that we're facing.
Ideally located for the purpose of meeting the coverage and capacity issues, not that the site itself was ideal. It's only 1,500 square feet. He was talking about the fact that it resolves the problems that you had with coverage.
Yes, and he said it's an ideal location for that purpose. Yes, I completely agree. So we have, Mike Crosby, he's here with us tonight. We have other members of the team, but Mike is the Verizon Wireless RF engineer. So if there are any questions of him, I'm sure he'd be happy to jump in.
Okay. Before we just open the public hearing, I wanted to just ask a couple of questions, things that have been lingering since this original application that were going to be fixed and changed or answered and have yet not been. So let me ask a couple of questions and we'll ask the board. In the original application, there was a contradiction between Millennium, who did your antenna analysis. They said you were going to have 6 antennas. Your application says you're going to have 12 antennas. When we spoke about this over a year and a half ago, you said, I'm going to check on that and find out if doesn't make any difference, or find out what the discrepancy was. I never heard back. Can you answer that now? Is it 6 or is it 12?
Mike, can you answer that question?
had to double unmute. So at the time, the application was for 6 antennas. The leasing portion of it, which is where I believe the lease exhibit and the ZDs came from, is for 12 antennas. So we typically lease and zone for 12, and then we install anywhere from 6 to 12 antennas, depending upon, you know, how the site goes through the zoning process. So obviously there's, you know, there's unknowns from when we start that process to when we finish it.
Well, does that doubling of the antennas affect any of the radiation or any of the things that they were discussing in their Millennium's report?
Millennium report would remain accurate. So our any of the safety margins that are discussed in the Millennium report would remain consistent. The cumulative power would be the same, regardless of the number of antennas. It's just which ports and which antennas we'd be using.
Okay. The other thing that remains a discrepancy, and you said to me, Mr. Olson, personally, that you would fix it, is that you have referred again throughout this entire application to the Mount Marion Firehouse Tower being the one that you're planning on building, being a Type 4 tower. You know, you just said it, it's a Type 5 tower, and yet throughout the application, nothing of that got changed. For the record, it should always say what the tower is. It's a Type 5 tower. And the reason that's important is because so many of the alternate sites that you looked at, you dismissed out of hand because they would have to be Type 5 towers. So the fact that we are starting this application again, and it still says throughout that it's a Type 4 tower, is just, it's unfortunate. I mean, we all know it's a Type 5 tower, but somebody's going to read it for the first time is not going to know that.
I cannot confirm it's a Type 4 or 5 tower because I don't know if it was approved. I don't have that personal information. So what we've always said in the application is we've always believed that initially it was a Type 4 tower. I don't have information if it's been approved or not. I don't think anything is in the record confirming that. That's why I took that position.
Approved by whom, Scott?
Proof,
I don't know.
what are we talking about?
You're the, Patty, if I recall correctly, you're the one that said this is not a type, the firehouse is not a type, well, I'm sorry.
You're building a new tower. It's a Type 5 tower.
But a new tower on a property that has an existing tower can be a Type 4 tower.
But that tower is not something that you can hook
You're
up
not
on.
going to add to that tower.
You're not going to add to that tower.
That's
And
not
that tower was never an approved tower.
But what I'm saying is I don't know. That's why I can't say it. I don't have personal knowledge.
You have no personal knowledge. Okay, so that's why you've been calling it a Type 4 tower. Okay.
So why don't we just,
It's been stated for the record, I believe the ZBA has stated that the firehouse tower was pre-existing zoning, which is why it was not approved. And that's why it was listed as a Type 5 because it did not meet the qualifications for a Type 4 tower.
Yeah,
that was
have-
said a number of times, Kim.
we haven't, after that said that it's a Type 4 or 5 tower. We just were, in our documentation, we laid out why we believed what we believed at the time. After this issue, we haven't been calling it a Type 4 tower.
What have you been calling it?
A tower.
A tower. So
Yeah.
why don't we put this right to rest? Why don't we just stop what's going on right now, and we'll make a determination whether it's a Type 4 or Type 5, which it is a Type 5. We told you that for the last year and a half, and then we'll continue when you get done playing the game of 4 or 5.
It's
Well,
not
Mr.
my game.
Poland
I didn't
said
raise the
it's
issue.
Type 5. He
believe-
put a Type 5 in the application, so he knows what a type of tower is.
I know it is.
And I
But
think
it's a-
for the record, the ZBA has made it known through, including the decision and the resolution on Monroe, that it's a Type 5 tower in the ZBA's record.
And that's fine. I'm not saying one way or the other.
Yes,
I
you
didn't
are.
raise the- I didn't raise the
Scott,
issue.
you're saying, that's what you've been saying for the last 5 minutes. You
No.
can't determine whether it was a Type 4 or 5. We've been
And that's
telling you it's a 5 for over a year and a half.
That's fine, but just because someone tells me something without evidence doesn't mean I'm going to say that's the correct. I'm just saying I can't make that determination.
We listened to you say that to us for a year and a half. And you wanted us to believe you. You told me that variance wasn't even supposed to be considered on Industrial Drive. So if I went by you, I would believe what you said.
I never said a variance wasn't
You-
supposed to be
you
considered.
certainly
We
did.
applied for a variance. What?
I can
What?
pull that I can pull up.
Okay.
All right. Does anybody else have any other questions from the board before we open the public hearing? Kevin, can you put up, by the way, can you put up that search area, get the search zone so that both Bill and Randy have an opportunity to look at that, and any other new members of the public who are on there know what the search zone is?
Trying, hang on.
Okay.
I'm not sure what happened here. It says I'm sharing it. Oh, there it is. Can you
Okay.
see?
So
There we go.
this is the search zone that Tarpon and Verizon used to determine where they could build the tower. You can see where the throughway is, and it's hard to see because it's a little turned around, but Industrial Drive is out here somewhere. I don't know which direction. This is Mount Marion Park over here. So I
Not
guess
that way.
this way is Industrial Drive. Okay. One of the arguments we had been making is that the search area was too narrow. It was only about a half a mile in each direction. And they were indeed able to find other tower locations outside the search area. But this is the area in red that they have been focusing on specifically in terms of where to site a tower. And they came up with the Mount Marion Firehouse because they thought they would be able to use the tower to co-locate on that, the tower at the firehouse at the time. They have since understood that they could not. Okay, thanks, Kevin. Oh, Randy or Bill, do you have any questions about the search area?
Nope, I'm good. I can
Okay.
see it.
Okay, does anybody else on the board have any questions before we open the public hearing? All right, I move to open the public hearing. Can I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 So any member of the public who has a question or a comment, you may certainly raise your hand or let Kevin know if you're on the phone, and you are welcome to speak about this application.
Just a reminder, if anyone's on the phone, it's *6 to mute and *6 to unmute.
I can't hear. I hear somebody trying to say something.
I see a phone number ending in 90. Are you trying to speak? I see two numbers.
Yeah,
but one
this is
says-
Angelo. So
Hello, Angelo.
I don't know if I don't want to be rude. I don't want to interrupt. So that's why I'm sitting in the back trying to see if somebody else is going to speak up.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm on the 583 Glasgow Turnpike, which I'm on the back side of the firehouse. It seems
Yes.
like the gentleman who's trying to say that it's not a type 4 or a type 5, or there's going to be six lines and 12. It seems like you're trying to push it to where it meets the minimum, but as they build it, they're just going to keep adding and adding and adding to where it's going to be a zone 5 or greater. Right where it is, I don't think it's going to be a good place for it. It's going to be in my backyard. My neighbor on the north side, on the corner, is going to be looking at it in his front yard. Casey's going to be seeing it from his kids from the pool and across the street as well. The variance is not applicable for where it's going to be, and I don't know why it didn't go into the industrial drive. So I think they're just trying to push it, just a bare minimum to get it in, and once they get approved, and it also stipulates that says it's not permitted in a residential hamlet under the town zoning law. So I don't know why we're going further. If they allow this, then other things in commercial buildings and greater is going to come in and try to do the same thing. If we approve this, more is going to come in the future.
Is Drew Wood still here on the phone, on camera from the firehouse? Can you hear me, Drew? Do you still have an active lease with Tarpon? I can't hear you. You're muted. Yes? Okay.
Can I talk to Drew Woods? He's the chief fire department, right?
Right.
Can I talk to him? this is gonna be a song. 2 years ago, the grade on the firehouse is pitched towards Glasgow Turnpike, and it goes into that French drain, and it floods out my backyard. And I confronted him 2 years ago that he was gonna put a curb and cut it behind the firehouse. Since then, my backyard flooded out numerous times, and I had a lawyer call him directly, and he was going to
Angelo?
take care of it.
This is really
Now,
not
can you take
something
care
that we can, Angelo, this is between you and the firehouse. This is not a zoning issue. This is not,
All right, not a problem. I figured this, since he was there, and I got, I don't want to do it, so it
okay.
is what it is.
We should
Not a problem.
stick to the matters at hand, but
Okay,
I'll
I'm
leave
sorry.
the two of you to work that out. Okay, anybody else? I
Just-
know that the public is here, so.
Just for the record, Patty, this is Kim. So in answer to your question, you had asked the fire department if the lease was active. Just for people who are on the phone, the fire department gave a thumbs up to that. They weren't able to speak. I don't know if it was a mute problem or not, but they gave a thumbs up. And then just again, for anybody who's on the phone who can't see it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Thanks, Kim.
Anybody else from the public have anything to say? If not, it's going to be a very short meeting.
I just want to know, Patty, what is the duration of the lease that was signed?
Mr. Olson or Mr. Booglen, can you tell us what the duration of the lease is?
Madam Chair, I don't have the lease in front of me, but it's over 30 years.
But is it renewed every couple of years?
Yes. 5-year
Okay.
renewal at the option of Tarpon Towers.
Okay, so you first signed it in 2019 and it goes for 5 years, and then you have the option of renewing it. Do they have the option also?
They have rights under the lease to terminate it if we don't fulfill our obligations, but no affirmative right to terminate a particular lease term.
Okay. Okay.
Patty, I see a Mr. Delano, I believe it is, had his
Oh,
hand.
sure. Yes. Go ahead, please.
You're muted, Mr. Del Villano.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm Biagio Del Villano. I live at 558 Glasgow Turnpike, just down the street from the firehouse site. And I have two questions, actually. Will Tarpon Towers be able to add other emitters? In other words, can they lease this to other entities other than Verizon later on? Will they have that right?
They do have the right. I don't know whether they're planning on doing it, but they certainly can.
And also, we've been down this road for like a couple of years now. It was already denied once. I'm just having trouble understanding why we're back to square one again.
Well, it was denied from immunity from zoning. That's
Okay.
not the same thing as denying the project. We denied it saying that they couldn't proceed outside the zoning law. And that if they were going to do it, they had to comply with the zoning. And that's what this is all about.
Okay.
I know it is complicated. I get it.
And so another thing I'm not understanding. So early on, I believe the RF engineer from Verizon is Mr. Crosby.
Yes.
But I apologize if that's not right. He had slipped one time and told us about another tower they were trying to get in down the road in Saugerties. So if they need additional towers, why can't a tower be put in the industrial zone somewhere and then find another spot for another tower that's not so daunting and still get what they need? I mean, these simulations, they're great and all that, but I deal with SCADA systems every day where we use radio frequency to go back and forth. And honestly, you need a real test, right, to make these things work. And I get that cell is different, but we use cell as well. So, I mean, is any real testing going on, or are these all just these simulations and these circles? And why aren't we going further than a half a mile? Why aren't we going 3 miles? I mean, the dead spot is all along the thruway. We've mentioned that tower that already exists multiple times. There was excuses that the land was contaminated. It's easy to look on the EPA website. That thing's been deemed clean forever. And actually another cell company is looking at it. So I just don't understand why we need another tower right here in the middle of the residential area.
Well, that is a question about the search zone that we have asked over the years. Actually, let me ask Mr. Olson or maybe Mr. Crosby. I looked on the town of Gardner website, because I understand that there's a cell tower planning to go up there, and citizens are up in arms, some of them. And I looked at the data, and they showed your search zone for that tower. That was a 5-mile search zone. So I thought that was kind of extraordinary, considering that we're at a half-mile search zone. So I think it's possible to have larger search zones. Whether or not it had to do with the geography of the place, I don't know. But I know the board considers the search area very small and very limiting and almost predeterminative to your choice. And particularly since you wiped out all possible type 5 towers. So that's just something to think about, because one of the last things we said at the last meeting when we were talking about our decision is that if cell companies would only read the zoning law and take it for real, take it for the fact that we want to do these things. We'd love to be able to site towers, but the siting criteria is very specific. We want to keep it away from homes. We don't want it to be within the fall zone of the tower and a home. And if people would just follow the criteria, as Joe said at the last meeting, you will be successful. But keep coming back with the same thing where it's so close to a neighboring property. It's very frustrating for all of us, because none of us want to keep denying. We don't want to do that, but because we know that the cell service is needed. But you're making it hard for us, I want to tell you.
I just looked up the search area for the Gardner site that you're referring to, and it's a 1/3 mile radius.
Oh, they had it up on the thing as a 5-mile.
That's not that anything referring to 5 miles as far as a search area is not in reference to Verizon site. I just looked it up right now, so I can tell you it's a third of a mile.
With AT&T. That's how they defined it. Search zone, 5 miles. So, okay. So it's a 1 mile, 1.3 mile search zone?
No, it's 1/3 of 1 mile, a third of a mile.
Okay.
Radius.
I'll look at it again. I was very surprised when I saw that it said the search zone 5 miles. So,
Patty, if I could just jump in, we know where your OLI zoning districts are. We know where your industrial districts are. There's no way to provide coverage throughout your town by just going in those districts, unfortunately. Your law was created 20 years ago, and it may have worked 20 years ago when we were using analog service. We're not using analog service, we're using digital service. That, the power of these phones during analog 3 watts, now they're what? I don't know, a 20th of a watt. The point is that you cannot cover Saugerties by using the OLI zoning district and industrial zoning district. And that's just a fact, unfortunately. So I understand your frustration. That's our frustration, though, is we can't do it. The technology, the science doesn't exist.
well, that's not exactly true, Scott, because we've talked about this before, that when you go into more urban areas and you need to put in cell towers, you don't put in cell towers, you put in smaller things that go up on light posts and so forth. There are technologies that don't have to end up being huge cell towers and can still provide service to small areas. We're not talking a big area here. We're talking Mount Marion Park, which is a group of residences. We're talking the school, and we're talking a little bit of area around Kings Highway and Churchland Road. That's what we're talking about here.
But again, what I said was
that we use in some areas are complementary to offload existing macros that provide service in the area. And as we've shown in this document and others, we don't have the architecture, the fundamentals, the framework, the network on air to begin with in order to solve the problem with small cells. And we have urban areas where oftentimes we have a hybrid solution where there's actually macros and small cells that work together to solve it, if the area is dense enough. This is a very rural area, with the exception of some pockets of different population. And we don't have the basic framework. So we're putting the skeleton of the system together right now. And as Scott mentioned, these sites that are on the air today, many of them are legacy sites that go back to the days of 3-watt mobile phones. It could go 10, 15, 20 miles away from the site. Now we're in an era where if you're a mile away from the site, 1.25 miles away from the site, you're off that site and onto the next site. And to put a stronger point on that search area size, we have existing sites that are within 2 miles of our proposed search area, meaning a 2-mile radius, you're literally at or past the next site. That's how far that is. So it's not realistic to continue to beat the drum that a 2-mile search area is realistic. It simply is not.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but I think your technology is getting ahead of what people are willing to tolerate. And that's a problem, because you're forcing it into residences, areas of residence, and it's a difficult thing for them to accept, and it's a difficult thing for the zoning board to deal with. We have a law that we have to deal with, and you have technology that you're trying to build. And they don't always gel very well, unfortunately. And I think at the firehouse, we've talked about this, Scott, the very first time that we had a meeting, we talked about how small that site is at 1,500 square feet. You even said it was. You admitted that it's a really small area. Not an ideal place to put a cell tower.
Oh, I never said it wasn't an ideal place to put a cell
You
tower.
didn't see, you said it was small. You agreed with me that it was very
I think you have
What's-
amnesia, Scott.
What did I say was small? Could you clarify that, please?
The 1,500 square feet, that's a small area for what?
You mean the lease area?
At the Mount Marion Firehouse.
Yeah, the lease area is a relatively small area that we're leasing. Yes.
Right.
But it's large enough to accomplish our goals. But yes, usually a little while ago we were leasing 10,000 square feet, 100 by 100. But this is smaller than that, so that's why I said this lease area is smaller.
That's exactly what she told you, Scott.
No, it wasn't exactly.
Okay.
Can I ask a hypothetical question here?
Yes,
This
go
has
ahead,
to do-
Biagio.
This has to do with risk, right? Let's say this thing passes, right? And the tower is built and something happens and that tower falls. Where does the liability stand? Who's getting sued here? Is the town getting sued along with Tarpon Towers and the fire department and everybody else? If that thing falls on a house? I think they are. Somebody must know that answer.
Mr. Olson knows the answer.
Yeah, the tower owner is liable for the tower.
Nobody else?
Nope.
Tower owner. That doesn't mean that you can sue anybody you want. That doesn't mean there's liability.
Well, but that's not exactly what you told us the last time. You're responsible for the firehouse. You have an agreement with the firehouse. But if it falls and hits a house or hits a car, those people have to file a claim. It's not like you just take responsibility. They have to go through the process of filing a claim with you or with Tarpon in order
Correct.
to.
I think that's what the gentleman asked. I think so.
Patty, may I?
Yes.
Bill Campbell from the Daily Freeman. So if I understand correctly, as we speak, as you plan right now, there's only one carrier planned for the tower. What is the total number of carriers that you'd be capable of putting on as we speak?
We haven't done the design work on the tower itself because we're discussing its feasibility and its placement with the Board of Zoning Appeals. So that is something that would be established when the structure itself is designed, if it ever is designed.
I know that was not an answer, was it, Bill?
It was a response.
Yeah.
If Madam Chair, if you'd like me to answer the question, I'd love to put 3 or 4 carriers on it. That's how I make money.
You don't have the room. You only have room for you, the firehouse, and you had told us, I think, at one other carrier, right? Is that correct?
I haven't said anything about that. I'll put as many carriers as I can in the space.
It's only going to be a 124-foot tower. And
Let him finish talking, Patty. I want to hear this.
go
Here,
ahead, Brett.
the question is, how many would it be capable of carrying if it were approved as it stands right now? How many is it capable of?
I would design it for 3 carriers.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else?
I have a question, Patty.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Joe.
If this tower is approved at the Mount Marion Firehouse location, you said the next tower will most likely go within 2 miles of that because of technology?
Mike Crosby, that question was for you.
Yeah, so I stated that we have another site that's within 2 miles, not that the next one would need to be 2 miles. It's different for each area depending upon where the traffic is being generated, how much traffic there is, which sectors of which sites, how many sites we have in the area. So every area is different.
You do have another plan within 2 miles of this tower.
Correct.
Can you tell us where it will be, where you hope to be?
Well, it's already on air. We have a site at the Ulster Travel. It's called Ulster Travel Plaza. It's not actually at the plaza, but it's actually a town of Ulster property where they have a water tank on the ridge line behind, to the west of where the Ulster County or Ulster Travel Plaza is located on 87, south of Saugerties.
It's in Ruby, Joe.
That's less than.
So it's an existing tower.
It's an existing site.
Yes, okay.
Yeah. Mike, maybe you can answer this for me. In the beginning of our presentation here, I don't know if it was you or if it was Scott. One of you said that it'd be 6 to 12
Antennas.
antennas. Yeah.
What? I missed the question, Henry. I'm sorry.
In the beginning of the presentation, I don't know if it was you, whoever said it, but it said it was 6 to 12 antennas. So
there was a question about it. If that's what you're saying, there was a question as to, I believe there's a discrepancy. In one place it shows 12 antennas, another place it shows 6.
That's correct.
And like Brett had mentioned earlier about the tower, there being unknowns. As we start this process, there's certain unknowns as well. So when we lease and zone the sites, we typically lease them from the tower owner and zone them for the 12 antennas, which is the maximum antenna configuration. And that doesn't mean that all 12 antennas are going to be the same size. The size that we show in the drawings is the maximum size. Oftentimes, in the period of a couple of years it takes place, the technologies change, we have different equipment available. And as is the case today, we would be, if we were to put out the configuration for that site right now, there'd be 6 antennas, just like we talked about in the original design, but we would have an additional 3 antennas. So it'd be 3 antennas per sector, so 9 total, as opposed to the 12 that's shown in the drawings. And the third antenna that we would have based on today's available technology, that's a smaller antenna. So it's a 3-foot antenna versus, I believe we had 8-foot antennas. So there'd be 2 8-foot-long antennas on each sector and 1 3-foot long antenna on each sector. That's how the configuration would go out today. But the problem that we face is that that's preliminary type information, and we need to nail that down as we go through the process. And the question about the RFE, the Millennium Report, we obviously, as that gets finalized, we will continue to, maintain that compliance. And there's no concern about that compliance. That compliance, we're hundreds of times below what the required limits are. So there's no concern that we would somehow be out of compliance. I just want to make that clear. And that's normal everyday business for us. We do this all the time. So it's not like there's a concern that somehow we would be at risk with that factor. It's more keeping the records clean, keeping good housekeeping.
Okay. I think for some of the neighbors, though, the difference between 12 antennas and 6 antennas is a visual impact for them. What they're looking at when they sit in their backyard or look out their kitchen window, what they're seeing is important to them. So that's why I asked about that discrepancy.
Eddie, we have a Julie from the public, I believe,
Okay.
with a hand
Yes,
raised.
please. Sure.
Hi there, Julie Dash from 793 Kings Highway. I am calling in to support the neighbors surrounding the firehouse, because as you know, we just successfully um, successfully kept the tower from being directly in my backyard. So I feel strongly that I'd like to support the neighbors and saying that I will still see the tower at Mount Marion Firehouse, obviously. But I have a question regarding the northernmost point of the search area on Kings Highway. Can someone identify what maybe a landmark of what the northernmost point on Kings Highway would be for an acceptable area or acceptable location for the tower to be? Does anybody have like a landmark?
Mike should be able to answer
Is
that.
that something you'd like me to try to help pinpoint?
Yeah, I would, because we've several of the neighbors have brought up concerns and also suggestions about locations along the thruway as potential sites for a tower. And a couple of things that were laid out there was the Solite property and the Fair Brothers property, and those were discounted pretty immediately. And one of the things I think, if I were someone that was trying to get a project off the ground, rather than just sending a letter to these places or an email, like site visiting and talking to the people, talking to the owners or talking to the management, and trying to collaboratively work with them. You would have to obviously make the price right for them, but they have existing businesses, and it's gravy for them to have money for just a cell tower on their property. So I just don't understand why the back and legwork isn't being put into this when we've been 2 years rehashing the same places that are right on residential properties. That just doesn't make sense. And I support everything that Patty has said tonight, that we're back in the same place where the neighbors are there are 3 or 4 houses that are, this tower is literally going to be outside their door.
I would just like to draw attention to the fact that Julie is one of the residents, as is Mike Rashidos on the call, who live within 500 feet of this tower application, but they were also part of the Industrial Drive one. So that's how close these towers were to each other. 500 feet. Julie had the tower right behind her house, and she's still within that, which she was asked to attend and participate in this meeting. So,
What's the Solite property? Is that the quarry property?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we did reach out to them and we spoke to them, and we cannot force them to lease property to us. They said point blank, we don't want to lease the property to you. We have other plans for it. I mean, that was in the record, but so we can't force people to just, hey, we want to put a cell tower here. Well, it's nice, but you're not going to. That's what they said to us.
Scott, I thought when I first years ago read that Telecommunications Act of 1996, that there was something in there about utilities cooperating with one another. That if one utility had a large property, and that they could make that, or would consider making it available to another utility if they needed a piece of it. Am I remembering that correctly? Because I keep thinking of the Central Hudson property, which is huge, enormous, right behind over on Kings Highway, right after the Industrial Drive. It's the property right next to it. And whether or not there'd ever been any outreach to them to find out whether or not they would be interested in leasing 1,500 square feet or 2,000 square feet of their property. They've got a lot of it back there, and it's just all not being used. They may, I don't know, but it just seems as a cooperative thing between utilities, that might be a good avenue to explore.
Yeah, I'm not, I don't recall there being in the Telecommunications Act, that cooperative requirement or anything like that, but
It wasn't a requirement. It was
Okay.
just talking about siting issues and I'd have to go back and look. It's been years, but I do remember that thing about utilities and working cooperatively with one another. But it was not a requirement. It wasn't the
Okay.
law you had to.
I can,
So-
I can help you out a little bit with it. I can't, give you the verbatim, but I can give you the sentiment of what the conditions were like before and after the Telecom Act of 96. Prior to 1996, employees of the wireless industry like myself were actually trained on what was known as anti-collusion laws. We were not allowed to coordinate with the competition. So the utility companies at the time, we now know them as AT&T and Verizon, our predecessors that existed at the time, we were not allowed to work together to site towers. And that was why oftentimes you saw each carrier had its own towers. Not saying that that's the case everywhere prior to 1996, but that's the sentiment. The Telecom Act of 96 was intended to end that. It was intended to promote co-location and have the ability to site multiple carriers at the same location, otherwise known as utilities or public utilities. So that sentiment is what, as an employee of the industry working before and after the Telecom Act of 96, I can assure you that was a landmark shift in the landscape, and it helped us to be able to ultimately prevent, more tower proliferation than what was necessary. And at the same time, there was also an additional 6 nationwide licenses that were auctioned off in the PCS arena, making a total of potentially 8 different wireless carriers. Today, we essentially have really 3 major carriers, but at the time, it was perceived there was going to be about 8. And so, of course, with having 8 carriers nationwide, they wanted to make sure the FCC, that is, through OET Bulletin 65B and the Telecom Act of 96, wanted to make sure the rules were in place to be able to co-locate multiple carriers on individual locations, as opposed to each carrier having its own tower.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
Sure.
Mike, excuse me, was Fair Brothers ever addressed?
Fair Brothers?
Yeah.
In the Telecom Act?
I'm sorry?
On Kings Highway.
Fair Brothers is
It's right-
I'm not familiar with Fair Brothers. That's why I was
It would
trying to
just
figure
be-
out what you were talking about. I apologize.
It would just be north of where Central Hudson is.
I don't believe so, because that would be well outside the search area, although I would have to defer to site acquisition or Scott
Outside the search area.
to give you that answer.
Mike, we're only talking a matter of a few hundred feet more than where you're talking about.
Regardless, I would defer to site acquisition or legal as to whether the Fair Brothers property was investigated or not, because oftentimes there's going to be properties that are investigated that I don't investigate myself, that aren't available. I'm only looking at the sites that are available to me.
I understand that, Mike. I just asked if you knew whether or not it was at least entertained.
I don't know.
That's right along the thruway. It seems like a great location as far as no homes, no nothing. And again, should be no problem following the zoning.
Same thing with Central Hudson, which is even closer.
So this is Julie Dash again. I think that all of this conversation that we're having just points to the fact that Mr. Olson and Mr. Crosby don't even know the location. If I'd been working on a project for 2 years, I feel like I would like to think I would do site visits and walk the land and see what was available and see what we're talking about. When I'm asking what the northernmost point is and a landmark, I don't know that was answered. It might be because we got off on other subjects. I would think that they would know these properties and know what we're referring to if they've really searched and done a thorough due diligent search on the properties. And it's been clear since I've been involved in this for the last year plus, listening and talking to neighbors and things, that we keep coming back to the same thing. They haven't investigated all the locations in the search area.
That's not true. We've identified every, Listen, in the search area, I'm not looking to be argumentative. In the search area, the fire department, without question, is the most appropriate property. I don't know how any reasonable person can conclude otherwise. I get why the zoning board suggested, could you do it in the OLI zoning district? But in that search area, the fire department made the most sense.
You hit it right on the head, Scott, in your search area.
Correct.
Right.
Right. But again, we can't just, listen, this citing a new site is based on physics. It's a science that studies, basically it's wave propagation, radio waves. It is a science. We can't just make it work and just say, okay, let's go a mile away and 2 miles away and do this because it'll work. And I've heard comments like that. Oh, we have a lot of land. You just go to the north. You're fine. Well, science doesn't support that. So we're trying to use the technology and place it in an area that we have to be. That's why Mike came up with the search area. I know that ZBA thinks it's too small. We hear you. But we looked outside the search area also. We looked along Industrial Drive. We looked along for the water tank property. I think that one gentleman mentioned that before. And we even explained why it couldn't be used because it was just way too far away. It doesn't work.
Any other questions or comments from the public?
This is Doug Pearson. Can I talk?
Oh, yes, Mr. Pearson, absolutely. Is Gina with you?
Yes, she is.
Okay, welcome to you both. Hi.
Just so everybody knows who we are, we're directly across from the firehouse.
Yep.
We're on the north side. We're the ones closest to the tower, proposed tower. The wife and I sent the board a letter on January 24th for this meeting.
Yep.
I hope you got a copy of it and you've read it.
Everybody got it sent to them.
Okay. I'd just like to make 4 comments about that letter. The letter was sent to bring us all up to speed because this has been going on for quite a while. In late 2020, we sent a letter of opposition with 30 signatures from the neighbors who are somewhere on this phone call. Thank you. And that was sent on our behalf by our lawyer, Andrew Campanelli, with a whole bunch of attachments and why the tower shouldn't be located at the Mount Marion site. The second comment I'd like to make is the fall zone, my house is in it. And that is not a good thing. And with the weather we just recently had here this past weekend, I'm not sure that's a once in a 100-year storm or not. The location, as everybody knows, doesn't meet the zoning laws. That's my third point. And the fourth point I'd like to make is the previous ZBA board meeting that was held last month on the 6th. Patty and one of the other board members read over, I believe it was 107 points in reference to that application. And then they voted no against that application. I personally believe a lot of those points apply to this application. And that's all I'd like to say, and I'd like to thank the boards for their time.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Gina.
Okay.
Anybody else? I know that there were some people that were not able to be on because they still don't have electricity, so they were not either. Kevin, did you get any late emails in today from any other members of the public?
No, I did not.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm good. All right. One more chance to speak if you have anything to say, or does any member of the board have anything that they would like to say? Okay.
Patty,
yes, Joe.
I know the physics may not apply to every site, but with all the opposition, with this being so close to people's homes, the safety issues, wouldn't you think, Verizon, you would want to look at a zone, maybe an area like that 16-acre that Central Hudson has? Physics may apply there. You don't know whether it does or not, I don't believe.
Anybody from
there.
Scott or Mike? Anybody want to? And please, I mean, I don't mean to be rude, but please don't tell us it doesn't fit in the search zone. We now know that you can find towers places outside the search zone. You found several in the light industrial. When you said you wouldn't be able to build a tower there, you certainly could. It worked in terms of your technology. What it didn't work with is that you put it right next to people's homes. But the site itself, the area itself worked in terms of you being able to find viable sites. So it rings a little hollow, I think, with some of us when we hear you say it won't work because it's not in the search zone. We've already laid to rest that things outside the search zone will work. It may not be the same as the firehouse, but anywhere you can get away from homes is a good thing, and a way to get successful, I think.
You're muted.
I'm muted?
No,
When
Scott
we,
is muted.
Sorry, thank you. When we moved to the industrial zone, the only way it was able to work was by significantly increasing the tower height. And actually, the tower height that was proposed was actually 30 feet less than the ideal height that Mike wanted, and that's in the record. So the tower height, what Mike wanted, was about 180 feet. And this board didn't, while you wanted us, before the politics got involved, you wanted us at Industrial Drive. And,
Excuse me, what
What
politics? What
politics?
politics?
Sorry about that. I'll retract that. But, and then,
That was a very good choice, Scott.
then the 150 foot, you didn't like the 150 foot, even though you said before that we can go up taller. So that's just the reality.
Scott, all we wanted to know was what was the minimal height necessary, not the ideal, the minimal height that you could still service it.
And we did that. We did that. And Ron Grafe even said that we did that in his letter in September 30th. He said, we've demonstrated that. That was
There's
just
a couple things to keep in mind too about the height. We keep talking about the height and these statements we made earlier that locations outside the search area don't work. And one thing I want to make clear is that if there's a perception that other areas within the search area work at the same height, that's incorrect also. Each location that we look at is subject to its own analysis. And so even though we're within the search ring, you might need a shorter tower, you might need a taller tower. It just depends on what the area morphology is like and the demographics and these things that we calculate the distances from and over and around. And as we moved outside the search area to the industrial zone, you asked us, can we make, and I asked you very specifically, I said, are you looking for an apples to apples comparison of this minimally intrusive proposal at the fire department to compare that in the industrial zone? And you said yes. And so I said, I'll analyze that. And I looked at it and I said, no, it doesn't work. And so you asked us, we really, really want you guys to go to the industrial zone, the OLI district, industrial drive. What would it take to make it work? And so we gave you that answer. So I don't feel that the hollow answers that you refer to, I don't see it that way. We've answered everything that you've asked. We've looked at every single alternative that you've asked us. If you can provide us with some details in excess of a 16-acre parcel, we'd be happy to look at anything and everything. Every single location you've asked us to look at, we've looked at. What would be great is if you provided us with some locations that weren't ridiculously too far away from where we're trying to serve. How about some alternate locations that are in the direction of where we're trying to cover, as opposed to some unpopulated area that we don't need to improve our capacity in that area. We need to focus on where the capacity problems are, and that's what we're doing here.
Mike, I'm going to just say this one time. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Patty.
I just want to say one thing about the height of the tower. The height of the tower, for me, is only really important when it's close to the residents, because then it becomes a fall zone issue. If you're in the middle of a field at Central Hudson property and you don't have anything around you, 150 or 100, that's not as crucial to me as it is if it's going to be near residents. So when we talk about the height of a tower, it's always in relationship to how it's going to impact the neighborhood and the people that live around it. That's why the tower height is important to me. So it's not apples and oranges. It's always very site specific. And that's why we encourage you to find sites that are not close to neighboring properties.
May I ask a question of Mr. Crosby based on his previous comments? So there were some alternative sites that were in the search area of Mount Marion, but you had noted in your report that they weren't analyzed because they were type 5 towers, and you were under the impression when you originally applied for Mount Marion that it was type 4, so you had dismissed the type 5 towers. Now that the ZBA has determined that the Mount Marion is a type 5 tower, is there a reason you haven't looked at those other alternative sites that are also type 5s within the search area?
The normal process for us when we go through this is, the RF team issues the search area. Then our site acquisition team goes out and scrubs that search area for viable locations based on whatever the rules are. When we issue the search area, we're issuing it purely on RF need. It has nothing to do with what a zoning district is or where there's an industrial zone or whether, one particular zone over another is a higher priority. We do not take that into consideration when we issue the search area. It's just purely based on RF. And so our site acquisition team works through that process of identifying parcels that are appropriate and available for RF to be able to use. Once we have willing landlords that are established within that search area that meet the other criteria, those candidates are then submitted to RF engineering for review. So when I said that there may be candidates that I have not reviewed that are within the search area, it's because those were not viable candidates for one reason or another. So I've reviewed every candidate that's viable. Now,
Mike, that's not really right. There were 21 sites that were dismissed without review because they were residential and would have been type 5 towers. That's what the report said that we got. And we asked about that, and they were not examined. So
I'm only telling you from the RF perspective, there's more to this process than just my role. My role as the RF engineer is to review the viable candidates that are submitted to me by the real estate team. So if there's candidates within that ring, every candidate, as far as I know, within that ring was identified and was vetted, and they were either viable or not viable for the reasons that were listed in the site selection analysis. The ones that were viable, I've approved or rejected and ranked. And the fire department, I know I've told everybody this, but for the new members that maybe haven't heard it before, our interest was in either using the existing tower at the fire department, so that would be called a co-location, or in removing that existing tower and replacing it with a more substantial tower that was stronger and taller with the intent of preserving the use on the property. And so that was how we ended up there. But I understand where the project is today, but I just want to understand that the spirit of the project that we were pushing and approving for this location, that's what our intent was to remove and replace that existing tower. And I realize that the application, may not be exactly in that format, but that was what we were trying to do here.
I just think Kim's suggestion of maybe eyeballing those original 21 locations, I remember 21 sticking in my head, that were dismissed and not considered because they would have been type 5 towers, might be worth somebody looking at now that you're in a type 5 situation. Yeah.
This is Sarah Coleman calling.
Hi, Sarah.
Stating. So just to maybe do a little bit of clarification on that. So the 21 properties that you are referring to, they were discounted because not only because they would have been type 5. That is true, but they were small residential properties. So if you have a property that is like 50 feet by like 73 feet deep, and it has a residence on it with a garage and a driveway,
oh, sure, of course,
you would never be able to put a tower on it.
Of course
that is how or why those 21 properties were discounted.
All of those 21 properties were very small residential lots?
Correct.
All 21.
Okay.
Correct.
I thought there were a few that were larger that were, and my recollection was that there were at least, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 or 4 or something, that it just said it was discounted because it was type 5 and the fire department
Was type
believed
4.
to be type 4 was preferred. And I know there were some that were discounted for the small size or residential properties. I thought there were a few that were considered and were dismissed solely because they were type 5, and that wasn't as good as a type 4.
Yeah, that was my recollection too. I'll go back and look at them. But we talked about it, Sarah, at length. I was very interested in those, and we had a long discussion, all of us, about why they were discounted, since the firehouse cell was going to be a type 5 also, and it's residential, and so it was in the exact same situation. So, but that's a subject for another day, I guess. Okay, anybody else have any comments? Any members of the public? Speak up. Board members? Scott, did you have something you wanted to say before we leave?
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
I
Rich?
just had a quick question, Patty.
Yep.
And I guess this would be for you, Mike. When you talk about something being non-viable, when you go through that criteria, I mean, obviously you're going to have major reasons why something gets dismissed, but I'm just curious, like, are there like minor technicalities that would cause something to be dismissed that may not be, not major, that, Verizon could work with, but is something you just don't want to?
Oh, no, I appreciate the
Fairly.
question, certainly, but obviously we're willing to try to overcome whatever the hurdles are that are before us. The criteria that I was referring to are really more associated with, real estate constraints. So, it's really, those sites it's not unusual for me to not be familiar with every single parcel or landowner name, because those are ruled out by real estate. Maybe there's wetlands there, or maybe there's, a right-of-way that's there, or maybe there's already an existing easement that crosses a property that has high-tension utility lines on it that you can't cross, or that there's something about it that makes it not viable. The list is unfortunately very long. Our real estate folks are the specialists in that, and they're able to, they work with the A&E group, and they identify all the parcels and what the land use is, and what the what the zoning districts are, and what the site conditions are. That's all, fortunately, from my perspective, I don't handle that part of it. They just provide to me what viable candidates exist within the ring, and they discount or rule out the rest of them. So I'd have to defer to Sarah or Scott, if they wanted to get into more details about what some of those other restrictions are. But I can tell you that it can be quite extensive, the list that can cause a site to not be a viable location.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I have a question, Patty. What's the existing height of the tower that's at the firehouse now? Why is the proposed tower so far away from that one?
The height at it's 80 feet, I think it is. And the tower,
We estimated it to be 80 feet based off of a drone fly, and I think the antenna on top is in the 15 to 20 foot length, so you've got an overall around 95 to 100. We were proposing a 116 center line, so it was modestly above that. I think Ron Grape even stated that, this was a very modest proposal with a 120-foot tower to support that. And then as far as the location is concerned, that was outside of my purview, so I'd have to defer to Brett or Scott on that.
I know that the fire department built something, it's probably built by now recently. It's like some type of a training structure. And I think that was part of why we had to be where we are. There's also DEC wetlands that are on the property. So that also dictated where we were. In fact, I think we're somewhat in the buffer area, and it's a New York State jurisdictional wetland. So that, combined with the existing building, that's kind of why we ended up where we are proposing the tower.
Scott, are the stakes still there that identify where the tower is going?
I honestly do not know. I can find out for you, though. No, looks like the fire department is saying no.
Okay.
can follow.
Randy, otherwise I would have said you could go over and see where the tower was going to be.
Oh, I know where the tower's gonna be, but I was just wondering why they wouldn't take the one tower down, put the other one up where the existing one is.
Well, because that would be right next to
I
the
could be
building.
wrong, but I think there was a septic or something like that in that neighborhood too. There was some other use there in proximity to the tower, the existing tower.
Okay. Well, my suggestion is that because including our planner and some other people weren't able to attend, we just leave this thing, the public hearing open through the next meeting, and that the ZBA should be prepared to begin discussions and deliberations at our next meeting, at our March meeting as well, so that we can move towards a decision. But I don't want to discount anybody who wanted to be on this call and couldn't. And I know our planner wanted to be on and wasn't able to. So if that's okay with everybody on the board, we'll do it that way. Is that all right? Just let me know.
I think that's the most optimal way. Yeah.
Right. That way we don't exclude somebody who missed it. And in case there aren't any other people, we can just begin having a discussion with what we've heard tonight and other things. And then plan to have our decision at the board meeting after that, the April meeting, have our decision. And so having said that, I'm not going to call the public meeting to a close because we'll bring it over to the next month. But
do you want to make a motion to keep the? Do you want to have a motion just to keep it open?
Okay.
I'll make a motion to keep it open until next meeting.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it then.
Randy seconds. Okay. Call, just say aye if you are agreeing to that. Aye. Aye. Okay.
Aye.
Yes.
Oh, I think that was just Joe. That was just Joe agreeing.
Oh, okay. All right. So the business is over, except for minutes that we have to approve and other things that the board may discuss. I do not know at this point whether next month's meeting is going to be virtual, because we haven't gotten any notice as to whether or not they're going to continue it. Not that they're not, but so we'll just have to post it on the website when we know if it's going to be in person or virtual. So I thank everybody, as always, for your participation. Thanks everybody from Tarpon and Verizon, and of course the public. You're always wonderful, and we'll see each other all again next month. And if the board will stay, we have some business to do. I'd like to make a motion to approve the January 6th minutes. Have a second?
A second.
Second.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. The other thing that I want to just, Henry and I both wanted to talk about is we had anticipated hearing something back from the fire companies. We gave them a little extra time and told them to kind of work out what they wanted to do in terms of their sign variances, or that they should talk to Kevin and find a way to get into compliance. I spoke to Kevin Brown. They had not contacted him. They did not contact the ZBA. They have not filed any additional clarification to their variances. And that's a problem, because it's almost like they just kind of said, we're just not going to do anything. So we have options. We have options of either just simply referring this to Kevin Brown for enforcement, or we try to get in touch with them and ask them again if Henry spoke to the chief, the person who was just elected, had a long conversation with him explaining, we understand you just came on board and you got kind of caught without knowing what's going on, but here's what you need to do, and talk to your people and get back to us and we'll resolve this. But nothing. So I'd like to hear what you think about all of this.
We have no other option than to refer it back to Kevin. They left no other option. So we refer it back to Kevin, and it has to be an enforcement issue now.
I know they did some homework and they found out that most of the signs at every firehouse in the town were unpermitted, and and they're gonna leave it like that. And if Kevin wants to, and Albie want to enforce against all the fire departments, that'll be a battle they have to choose, but.
So they didn't tell
Say
us
this
that.
again,
They're
say this
leaving
again,
you to
Randy.
tell us that?
Excuse me, Patty. Excuse me, Patty. Say this again, Randy.
You've got signs at most of the firehouses that weren't even permitted, didn't get a permit for. The one right there in Glasgow, they don't have a permit. That's way too close to that's within a foot of the town right away. You have one that they just put over at the Asbury, in the West Camp Firehouse, which does not meet the square footage variance.
Let me tell you something
have a
on
whole
the
list.
Glasgow Firehouse one. That's not
That's
within.
what?
That's not within the right of way.
That's
That post has been there for 30, 40, 50
so
years.
you can't. They just put a new sign there, Henry.
Yeah, the new sign.
So when they put a new sign in, they have to comply to the laws, just like you told the fire departments.
It is complying with the law. That's not over 32 square feet.
They did not get a permit for it. That's what I'm saying. I got that from the homeowner who signed the sit sign.
From what homeowner?
It's not. I'm just saying that the fire departments went and they took measurements of other signs, and if the town wants to, I'm just saying, if the town wants to push the thing about the fire departments, they're going to have a battle on their hands. That's all.
But you got two signs though, Brandy. What are you referring to?
There's a sign.
You're not talking about one.
There's a sign where the president of the Malden West Camp Fire Company is Kevin Brown is not in compliance at the West Camp station.
But you are putting up new signs in addition to an existing sign.
They just put a brand new sign up at the West Camp station. They put a brand new sign up 2 years ago at the Saxton Firehouse that's not in compliance. And all of a sudden our signs aren't in compliance.
But wait a second. The sign law for the fire department and emergency services, the digital signs,
yes.
That just went into effect last year. They
Correct.
did.
And if you read it properly, it says this is a public service sign, it's exempt.
Right.
And we do public service announcements on there.
But you still had to fit with the sign
the size.
The sizes.
Yeah, but I'm saying if you put a new sign up, you have to fit into the law. You're saying Glasgow put
into the
sign. You still have to get a permit, Henry. You put a new sign up. You told Mr. Swart that we had to comply because we swapped one sign for another. The sign
what
size
I told Mr. Swart.
The sign size. The size of the signs did not change.
Wait a minute, Randy. You don't know what I told Mr. Swart.
I'm going by what I heard you told him.
Okay. Well, I'm going to tell you what I told him.
Okay.
I told him that the reason why he was able to stay with what they had because it was existing. Now, you put up another sign, which you, by the way, he agreed. You agreed. The fire companies agreed with Kevin saying that if this sign goes up, the other one comes down. That was agreed upon by the fire company and the building inspector. You're shaking your head no. Well, then either you're lying or Kevin's lying.
Oh dear.
Which one is it?
We were told if as long as we stayed within the same size that we had, we could put the sign up.
You're not with the same size. That's
Okay.
what the issue is.
I'm stopping this only because this should not be a fight within fire department.
I'm just telling you why you haven't heard back from them because they're not going to take any action.
Well, then fine. Then,
okay.
Patty, I make a motion that we refer back to the building department and let the enforcement take care of it.
Do I have a second for that?
I'll second it, Patty.
Okay, and let's do a vote, please. Henry?
Yes.
Tim?
Yes.
Randy?
I abstained already, so that's on Bill.
Right. Joe? And I vote yes. Okay, so I will draft a letter to Kevin and tell him that we have not got compliance and we haven't gotten a response. And we are sending it to him for enforcement of the sign law that was put in place just to help the fire departments and the emergency services.
To help the fire departments, now they're arguing the case.
So that's unfortunate. I mean, that's really unfortunate. I mean, oh well, okay, it is just unfortunate. So I will hopefully find out more about what we're going to have a remote meeting. I hope we have a remote meeting. Okay. Can I have a motion to end the meeting, to adjourn?
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
Okay, second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye, please. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, onward, everybody. Kevin, you and I will talk first thing in the morning when you get into work, okay?
Very good.
Okay.